Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special Visions and Voices celebration of the music, life, and times of America's foremost classical music composer, William Grant Still. We're very lucky to have with us tonight in the audience Mr. Still's daughter, Judith Ann Still. So would you please recognize her? I am Gary Glaze. I'm a professor in the Vocal Arts Department of the Thornton School of Music. This evening's program is the result of a collaboration partnership with the USC Libraries and the Thornton School. This musical program has been arranged, directed, and is being performed beautifully, I might add, by students of the Thornton School. Our special thanks go to the music director, Karine Avakian, and pianist Mitsuko Morikawa. Their wonderful work has not gone unnoticed by any of us. Also, we want to recognize the operatic baritone Peter Lightfoot, who could not be with us tonight, but from the very beginning of this project has suggested many of the works, the selections that you're hearing tonight, particularly the operatic ones. Finally, I want to say that this event, entitled Songs of Separation, is the inspiration of Susan D. Anderson, whose tireless efforts have made it all come together. Ms. Anderson is the director of LA as Subject, an archival association hosted by the USC Libraries. She's also the author of a recently published book of poetry entitled Nostalgia for a Trumpet, Poems of Memory and History. It gives me great pleasure then to introduce to you Susan Anderson, along with her colleague Lance Bowling, music historian and president of Cambria Music. Please welcome Susan and Lance to the stage. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, braving the rain. We never know what to do here when it rains, do we? Are we supposed to go outside? We don't always know that. I want to do something before Lance and I have a brief conversation about the music that we're hearing tonight. I'm so pleased that Gary acknowledged that the composer's daughter is here with us. I want also to mention that tomorrow Judith Ann Still will be presenting a lecture along with rare archival photographs, a slide lecture that you're invited to. Please let other people know. It will be held at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in Doheny Memorial Library, which is just across that way on the second floor in our beautiful intellectual commons. There'll be a reception afterwards, so please feel free to join us there. And I just wanted to find out if anybody from the League of Allied Arts is here tonight. I can't see you.
No.
Who is it?
Oh, way in the back.
Hi, they are here, very good. One of the organizations that knew and supported William Grant Still and his work here in Los Angeles. The League was founded in 1939. Also wanted to find out if there's anybody here from the William Grant Still Arts Center. Good, I'm seeing somebody waving. You should also know that in 1978, a community arts center was established commemorating William Grant Still, and it's still there. Run by the city with some wonderful programming and wonderful staff. Also, I wanted to mention that, find out if there are members of Bethlehem Lutheran Church in Granada Hills here. Hello. Thank you very much for coming and for your support. The great conductor Leopold Stokowski said, "In my opinion, William Grant Still is one of America's great citizens because his musical nature has given him the power to fuse into one unified expression our American music of today. This blending into one stream of diverse racial, cultural origins is most important to the future of our country. For the reason that we Americans come from so many racial origins, we must find a way to harmonize them into one. Still has succeeded in this to a remarkable degree. Maybe, Lance, we should say a few words about who William Grant Still was.
Okay. He was born in Woodville, Mississippi, 1895. 3 months after his birth, his father passed away. The family moved to Arkansas. Both of his parents were teachers. He grew up in a middle-class type neighborhood. It was a mixed racial neighborhood. He went on to Wilberforce for 4 years, then worked with W.C. Handy for a year or so, went to Oberlin, turned around, entered and went into World War I in the Navy, came back, worked for Mr. Handy, studied with two major composers, one, George Chadwick, and then Edgar Varese. Very interesting, because Mr. Chadwick was a tonalist from the New England Conservatory of Music. Edgar Varese was writing pitchless works like Ionization and other things like that. And I find it interesting to hear this piece here from 1926, The Breath of a Rose. There was no date on your, but anyway, it showed some of the early work from there. Anyway, from that time, let's see, we're in the mid-20s, still is in the music, let's say the intelligentsia, the literati of New York. And then he redirects himself and decides not to go with the ultramoderns and begins working with folk idioms. Comes up, writes the Afro-American Symphony, 1930. Howard Hanson did the first performance. Interestingly, Mr. Still did not have the money in 1930 to go from New York to Rochester. And Howard Hanson knew this and turned around and reprogrammed it later that season and gave him a stipend to come and do a lecture. Am I talking too much?
No.
Okay, so we're in the 30s.
I'll let you know.
Well, I think Judy can do this better. So we're here in the mid-30s. Let's see, radio was very important to Mr. Still's career. He had the ability it was a wonderful arranger, and he did a lot of Broadway shows, both in the black idiom and also mainline Broadway type materials. He begins writing more tonal materials in the 30s. Radio, you see, you could do a concert at the LA Philharmonic and 1,800 people would hear it. But when network radio came in 26, 27, millions heard it. Mm-hmm. And that's how Mr. Still became so renowned, like several other American composers.
And I think it's important for us to know that during his lifetime, he was celebrated. He was renowned. Orchestras in the United States, in Latin America, and Europe played his work as a part of their repertoire. And in some ways, I think the work has become eclipsed, and that's partly why we're so happy to have live performances tonight.
Right. But for what it's worth, there's over 125 major works. There's 5 symphonies, 9 operas, 4 ballets, amongst other things. And this work that I just heard here, Plain Chant for America, as you notice, it was quite a workout for the pianist, let alone the baritone, but it's really an orchestral work. She did a nice job on it, though. Yeah.
I want to ask you, we've called this program Songs of Separation, and that cycle of songs we heard from earlier in the program, and they're songs about being separated from your love,
Right.
But partly because of the history of America and the racial history of America, that term separation and songs of separation has kind of multiple meanings for us. And the theme of our programming is dilemmas of American classical music. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what some of the dilemmas are that are represented by his work and the classical music world's embrace of it.
Dilemmas from what period? You mean the mid-30s?
Well, the time when he was, I would say, more mid-century, and he was considered the dean of Negro composers.
Yeah, it's
by
interesting.
then.
A journalist called him the dean of Negro composers. Of course, by the late 50s, that was not a good terminology, so they said the dean of Afro-American composers, and but still essentially wrote and tried everything. He took the high road on. He was a trailblazer, and he believed really much in the brotherhood of man, and that's essentially where it went. He did buck up against a lot of racial problems, sometimes in performances, particularly in the opera Troubled Island, but I sense he usually won out. The music just continues. And but Songs of Separation, as you probably figured out, is essentially black poets, and the suite for violin and piano, for what it's worth, that actually is 3 portraits by 3 African-American artists. And so you can see he always tried to put that together. In the late 30s, he wrote a piece called And They Lynched Him on a Tree, and in fact, Stokowski performed that on NBC about a year, and Stokowski was doing a lot of other African-American materials, and finally in 1944, NBC said no more, and he was let go, and he lost that orchestra. So,
Is that when they brought Toscanini in?
No.
After Stokowski? Oh, okay, sorry.
Well, yes, somewhat, yeah. They created another NBC orchestra for him.
For Toscanini, okay.
But dilemmas, this was something he had to always deal with. After all, he was married to Verna Arvey, a wonderful journalist, but she was Jewish and white, and interracial marriages were difficult at that time. And when they were married in 1939, you could not get married in California. Interracial marriages were prohibited. They had to be married in Tijuana. So, but even with that, go ahead.
No, I'm remembering the timeline when the California State Supreme Court struck down the illegality of interracial marriage. It was in the 40s.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my pilgrimage was still is essentially as a record producer and interested in Los Angeles music. I ran into so many people that knew the Stills, and they held, particularly musicians and performers, they held both of them in great regard. And they were, Verna was a wonderful journalist who wrote maybe 125 articles for Etude. She was the West Coast correspondent for Dance Magazine in the 30s. She wrote a landmark book called Choreographic Music on composers of the dance. And she was also the principal librettist for most of Still's operas.
Mm-hmm. That's important.
Yeah.
And we heard some of the songs that she wrote the lyrics to
Right.
tonight, too. People will notice in their program. I think a lot of people who have heard about Still are aware of him as a symphonic composer. We focused on music for voice, and maybe you could talk a little bit about his vocal creations.
I suppose at the Still's stepfather, Mr. Shepherdson, bought in, maybe 1905, 1907, a Victrola. And so Still grew up listening to Wagner and Verdi, and those were his role models. He always wanted to write opera, and that was his favorite medium. But in going to the Still home, I was always impressed that they had wonderful books that were very rare even in those days from the Harlem Renaissance. He collected all the poets, all the novels, all of that. Many of them inscribed because he was personal friends with those people. He was a very literate man, so he knew how to write for the voice. He knew where to place the consonants and the vowels, and it usually comes through, as you notice, the music just soars. And I've always get a kick out of it because I usually can see the enthusiasm in the performer. I think most performers like to, particularly the vocalists, like to sing his music.
Sing his songs.
Yes.
We're going to wind down in just a minute, but you did bring up, I read that Still really thought of himself maybe primarily as an opera composer. And this latter half of our program tonight is all arias from several of his operas. One in particular, the next piece we will hear in just a moment, is an aria from Troubled Island. And if, couple of things, if you have a chance to go to the William Art Still Art Center, you will see that there is a mural that was done by two wonderful artists. I just want to get their names right, Nona Olabisi and Charles Freeman, that depicts Still conducting Troubled Island, which is based on the story of the first revolution in the Western Hemisphere, the revolution in Haiti at the end of the 18th century. And that opera itself is really so extraordinary, but it's called Troubled Island, but it had a kind of a troubled history as well that I don't think the composer anticipated.
No, he completed it in 1938, but it took some 11 years to get it performed. And even with the help of Fiorello LaGuardia, Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, Stokowski, it wasn't until the conductor of the New York City Opera had a stack of scores because they were going to try to promote American music. And he said, well, I think I'll take the one on the bottom. And he pulled it out, and there it was, Troubled Island, put it on the piano, he liked it. But he never knew that it was going to have some type of, Troubled Island, the opera, is essentially a perfect example where politics got in the way of art. And it was the wrong timing. In the late 40s, we were having all sorts of problems with communism, there were HUAC hearings, and this was an opera about slave insurrection, even though it's really about, it's a love story with one of the great love duets in the operatic, materials. Anyway, Still thought it had 3 performances. Langston Hughes was the librettist predominantly, but a couple things had to be redone, and Hughes wasn't available, so Verna did a couple of the arias as well. But anyway, by the time it showed up in 1949, there were a lot of politics involved. Still was pretty naive. He was here in LA. He comes to New York, and it's a hotbed, and there's essentially, he gets, the night before the first performance, one of the critics actually comes to a hotel, to his room, and says, I want to let you know, Billy, they're going to pan the opera. And then the Radio Free Europe, what's the organization called?
Well, the State Department.
Yeah, the State Department.
Voice of America.
Voice of America, excuse me. They went ahead and recorded the last performance, and it was going to be used to perform, to be given to the embassies so it could be played around the world. And then they asked and recalled and demanded that all of the big transcriptions be returned, not broken or thrown away or anything. They wanted to return, they didn't want them. So anyway, what happens is, essentially it's a wonderful opera. It merits another performance, a great performance.
We're going to hear an aria from that in just a moment. I do want to mention again that tomorrow Ms. Still herself will be talking in greater detail about the composer's life, and please join us at 1 o'clock in the library and for the reception. And I also want to mention that for those of you who would like to go into a little more detail on your own, on our website, the library's website, there's a guide, an online guide that will show you books and recorded music that are in the libraries here, and also other information from this program. So please take a look at that. The information is on the back of your program. We can thank Sue Tyson for that, and I also want to say thanks very much to Tyson Gaskill, who makes all of these things possible for us to do on our library staff. Is there something that you'd like to mention before we go back to the singing?
I guess the one thing is that to let people know that Mr. Still was a very spiritual person. That doesn't mean going to church, but on all of his scores, you would always look and you would see, with humble thanks to God, the source of all inspiration. And he really believed that. And I have to say he took the higher road. I might also mention that when Verna passed away in 1987, there were very few performances of Mr. Still's work. And at the time, Judith there, she stepped in and she rebuilt William Grant Still music. And at this point, I would probably say the Afro-American Symphony is the most performed symphony in the United States. I just wish that we'd hear it every month of the year besides February. It merits it.
And on that note,
Yes.
thank you so much. So I just want the people who are going to move the chairs away to know that we're going to go back to music.
With each